suppose urban diffuse pollution, from our point of view, it starts on people's doorsteps, in their street, in their drain pipe, and we all know these kinds of photos, front gardens getting paved over with impermeable materials. Whenever I see a front garden being resurfaced, and that's probably every couple of months, I will stop and I say, does the water go through that? And every time I'm told, no, don't worry, I've concreted under there, nothing can get through. So that's despite the change in 2008. People have zero awareness of it, and the paving contractors seem to have zero awareness of it. Within London, this is within Enfield, I've not gone any further, but it's been 100% disappointing so far. And there's lots of places like this where at most it's used for car parking, as opposed to any other benefit in terms of water quality. And this lack of green drainage and green infrastructure means that we see things like this, and of course this is going straight into rivers. So this is the North Circular, and this is going into the Thames Brook, or a channel that leads to the Thames Brook. You can see the staining on the wall. Again, the Thames Brook taking a hit here. This is off the roundabout where the North Circular connects with the A10. So every time it rains, of course, this is going in. But not enough people know about diffuse pollution. It's something that's kind of hidden away, and we sort of collude in that, really. We don't help in trying to explain that to people. So if you go to many councils' websites and try and look for information about misconnections, you'll struggle to find anything that helps you understand what's going on, or any information about why your front garden paving should in fact let the water through. It's a real maze of information, if it's there at all. And so people don't know that the roads pollute rivers every time it rains, and so that means it's no surprise to me when I go to Hackney or Enfield or Haringey, and those rivers stink like toilets and they froth like a kitchen sink, and they're covered in a sheen of oil. This disconnection is complete. And that led, in the summer, this is the River Lea, just north of the Olympic Park. There was a storm event in July that saw at least 10,000 fish killed. A short, sharp storm event. It wasn't torrential. Washed what had been building up on the roads for 2 weeks straight in, and a grey wave washed down the Lea. Oxygen dropped to zero. Eels crawled out to escape it. Of course, most fish, this pike included, couldn't do that, so they perished. And if you look at all the water quality data, proves that is what actually happened. But people don't understand that; they don't see that connection. And the fact that it's so confused is evidenced by the fact that you have things like this, where you have a kitchen drains, pipes going straight into the drain pipe that leads to the river, and so people become unknowing polluters of their local river. They break the law without even knowing. That's how kind of Lewis Carroll it's become, how topsy-turvy, that the responsible citizens who otherwise would consider themselves to be guardians of the environment end up polluting it every time they put the wash on, or wash up their crockery. And so sustainable drainage to me is that cornerstone of getting people to understand how the urban water cycle works, and that there's a different way of doing things. Every, whether it's in Nottingham or wherever it might be, but every sort of green drainage or sustainable drainage system that's put in is like a green exclamation mark on a street that says, it's not about doing it as we would normally do with concrete. And it gives that indication that there is something quite different, something sort of celebratory about that isn't sort of tucked away. But it's weird because the vibe around SuDS is quite sheepish, so it's in the kind of the poker game between concrete as usual and verdant green spaces on our streets. There's always SuDS that bleeds first, whether that's the national guidance on SuDS and SuDS drainage, down to the fact that so often front gardens are paved over with stuff that doesn't let the water through and just makes it a worse problem. London is a world city, and there are people who do stuff on SuDS in London, thank goodness. But how long will it be a world city if that kind of quality of life is eroded through intensifying development? At best, if we carry on as we are, we can just about cope with things. But it's unlikely that we'll be able to achieve that. So we need to, if we want to reduce the risk of street flooding, improve water quality, reduce air pollution, then SuDS has to be that way forward. I believe they're very passionate, and it's very much about taking it out of the, we're all converts pretty much, so we know the benefits they have, but people out there don't. And I think the approach that we're taking is too shy, really. So the Thames Brook project, we very kindly got a load of money from DEFRA, which was great. We're spending it now. So it's Enfield where we're doing this, which is there. Doesn't all fit neatly inside that rectangle. And it's the Thames Brook. So that is the black line going from kind of northwest down to southeast through a bit of open countryside, and then down into very urbanised areas through concrete channels, culverts, roads going into misconnections, and then eventually into the, it goes into the channel that joins into Thames Brook and comes out into the Lea at Tottenham Hale. So it's a kind of a dichotomy of the river. On the outbits it is very raw and very nice. Enfield is 49% green spaces despite the pictures of paving over. So there's a lot of space there, potentially. And that's just some of the details based on what we're, the kind of top line of what we're doing with this project. And it's very much about creating SuDS in public spaces where people will see them. Not necessarily trip over them, but certainly they'll encounter them and it will make them rethink the way that they relate to their local river, that urban water cycle. And I think key to the project is that we've been doing a lot of work around the Lea Valley in that catchment, talking to people about the problems that see the Thames Brook and the tributaries of the Lea, and the Lea itself failed the Water Framework Directive, and it's making it worse, if that's the words, progressively. So it's been downgraded since 2009 to 2011. So we're talking to people about those wider issues, the problems, to get them to understand ultimately why it is something like SuDS would be important. I think that's a kind of building blocks. So we've already been talking to the council and all the projects sites within Enfield. So they're going on a bit of a journey in terms of understanding how they can do things differently, which is fantastic. And those are the kind of the top line outputs of the project, but then there's the additional ones, which are change behaviour, getting the council to progress. I wanted to see do things like put information like misconnections on its website, so we can direct people to that, because a lot of people who go through the planning process or permitted development and building control, they'll go to those pages, but the information won't be there, so they're left with nothing. So the kind of system lets them down at that point, and it's this website exists. It puts newsletters, so all these councils could use those existing resources to spread the message. That's not about additional cost; it's just a time factor. And without that information, then how can you make an informed choice? And we had lots of friends groups and different people who were concerned about the quality of the water within their park, the river that flowed through it. Were unhappy that it was so disgusting, were sad that there were no fish in it. So when we sort of turned up and said, well, this is what's happening and this is how it could be different, they were very keen to facilitate that. So there's a very strong message about water stewardship and the right to clean water, to clean rivers, as being underpinning all of this, as not being an optional extra, it's not a lifestyle choice. We're very unapologetic about standing up for rivers and saying, this is the only future, not to pollute them all. Water quality sampling is a part of it. It'll just be interesting, produce some nice graphs. We know they work, but it'll be good to prove it. The Thames Brook is the black line in the middle going from top left to bottom right, and there's a few tributaries that are very modified water bodies that come in. The stream that comes from Boxers Lake, Housden Gutter is its official name. We call it the Housden Stream because it just sounds a bit more appealing. And so we're looking at doing some of the SuDS on those branches, on those tributaries. The tributary makes some sound like babbling brooks, and they're certainly not that. This is the Thames Brook itself. This is one of the outfalls off the A10 that goes straight from the Thames Brook. You can see the result without your eyes. It's obviously not healthy at all. It goes in with no treatment at all. Boxers Lake. Upstream of the lake itself, you've got this urban river that is fed from some groundwater, but all really the surface water that comes from those surrounding streets and properties. This is a kind of a gelatinous white substance that just accumulates on the riverbed. It also has sewage fungus as well, so it manages to tick off as many of the sick elements that you could possibly want. And it smells. You smell it before you see it. This is in an area, Winchmore Hill. People like Michael Caine and Peter Sellers used to live around there. This one pipe is fed by one crescent, Eversley Crescent, and they're kind of multi-million-pound homes that are on there, swimming pools and all the rest of it. But unfortunately, there's at least 2 washing machines and a couple of toilets that flush straight into that. So that's macerated toilet waste coming out there. This was earlier in the year, so the water's quite deep. Went back recently, and you can see the clods of toilet paper and toilet waste just building up on the bed of the river. And knocked on lots of doors. It's a good experiment. We know it's a very small catchment, so we're looking to get some action there through the detection, that sort of route. But just getting people's response. Of course, most people were puzzled that this could happen. They were like, well, but how? That's like the Middle Ages. I mean, did we forget about this stuff? And they assumed that it could not happen. So that's another kind of myth that people are sort of sold. That absolute information means that their kind of ability to question is removed because they don't expect that it could possibly happen. We explained it, and then they all went away and they all checked their homes, and they were very eager and happy to tell us who was away on holiday. So that ruled them out of the equation, but it could have been another way of funding the project, I suppose, if and they were like, well, something's got to be done. So again, it's like, well, yes, and talking with them, having that dialogue is part of that process. We will look at doing something in and around Groveland's Park. It suffers very high phosphate and nitrate levels, which saw the algal bloom a couple of years ago, and people were petrified. It was the centenary this year, and there's the danger that they'd had an algal bloom during the middle of their centenary. There wasn't, which is great, but the people there are hyper aware now that action needs to be taken, which may well see, there's the kind of the education aspect to it. It might be putting a reed bed in the lake, and also some SuDS treatments as well. So, just to give you a bit more detail on a couple of the projects, we're working very closely with Bob Bray Associates, and Bob and Kevin from there. And if I go down, that's to the right-hand side, that's Boxers Lake. So this is the water body that flows into Boxers Lake that has the sewage fungus and all the rest of it. On the left is where it originates in terms of coming to daylight. It's a very wooded area, lots of brambles and things like that. So people do use it, but it's not it's a Enfield council site, but it's not used by people in a recreational way. So the aim here is to create some little sort of basins and divert the flow using sort of small weirs and turn it into a wet woodland. So it's almost like a restoration project as well. So we're returning this bit of river or stream to very much like how it would be back in kind of post-ice age, I suppose. In that you would have had a very diffuse water course that slowly, as you went further down, the catch would have appeared as a proper stream. So, if you like, it's going back to the real old days, and that will filter out. There's going to be places where we'll be taking the runoff that would normally go straight down the gullies, but also the body of water in the channel as well. So there will be some works there where we're talking to local people about that, and it's a great discussion. I doubt we've got more than 4 months to do it, because I think the timescale helps in terms of explaining these ideas. What's interesting is that people are really concerned about sort of trees being cut down. I don't like trees being cut down, just as a proviso, or foxes. What happens to the foxes? And yet people are a whole lot less concerned about the environmental effect on the river, and the diversity of habitat in the river, the diversity of species in the river, and so almost quite happy for that to be devoid of any real life. So it strains that sort of mind split between somebody being concerned about the land vegetation and the land habitat, but having little or less interest in the water aspect to it, which is odd given that all our drinking water comes from water. So it's interesting, but yeah, part of that, the project is exploring those ideas. So we're in the process of taking all that forward at Boxers Lake. This is another site. The big grey swathe at the bottom is the Hansden Road. Some of that drains into the Hansden Stream, or the Spinning, which is the sort of curve around the top. And the bit in between, again, is another wooded area with some boardwalks, which need replacing. And it's an Environment Agency storm detention basin, which rarely floods because it's built for sort of extreme events. So it's not performing a regular role in terms of flood protection. So we're kind of thinking, well, we could use that. You know, there's potential there to divert the river into that area, and again, turn it into a wet woodland. And obviously do something about that horrible terracotta pipe that's putting all that toilet waste and washing machine waste in as well. So making that connection between the source of pollution, we want that to stop, we'd rather that SuDS treat that, and restoring a more natural kind of catchment, you know, given the loss of the green space through paving that's happened. And then there's the A10. You saw the shot of where it goes into the Thames Brook at the moment. So the plan here, and this is a very early concept drawing, it's by no means anything definitive, but it's to divert through swales the runoff from the A10 into those before it goes into the Thames Brook, and then take quite a large catchment of surface water drainage, which will include some disconnections through the treatment basins, and having enough capacity to deal with that. We're linking it to the Thames Brook flood alleviation project. So on site there's going to be mitigation work to remove some of the concrete bank and scoop it out. So part of this is kind of making the case for it's possible, it's affordable, as long as it's planned and integrated with other works that are going to be happening anyway. So somebody else pays for the diggers to come on, and that, you know, we can cover the design costs. That's the kind of picture we're making. And so it's a very interesting discussion, but we're trying to push Enfield Council to encourage them to become a river-friendly council, because they have so many rivers, unusually for London, that are on the surface, that they're potentially a fantastic amenity, if nothing else. And the fact that they too often are used as dumping grounds is an embarrassment. You can avoid things like that happening. This was just off this in Bromley by Bow, and this was some of the dead fish that got washed down, some of the bream got killed. So it's all bound together by the Love the Lea campaign, which gives the overarching catchment approach to why the stuff needs to happen. So it's kind of micro to macro level.